Tonight on Another Thing About Tartan, I'm really pleased to welcome John Mulhearn from the National Piping Centre. He's joining us this evening from Glasgow and is the Head of Piping Studies at the National Piping Centre. So for those of you who aren't already aware, the Centre exists to promote the study of music and the history of the Highland Bagpipe. And this is a really exciting week to get to speak to John, as it's currently Piping Live. So that today runs through till this Sunday, and it includes a fully kind of live streamed number of concerts that have already been going on, and there'll be lots more this weekend. And then I, for one, can't wait to find out about how John first got involved in the centre and piping, and more about what's been going on this week. So welcome, John.
Hi Emily, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. John, how are you?
Very well, thank you, yeah. Joining you from sunny Glasgow.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you for taking the time out from a busy week to speak to us.
Very good, no, I'm just pleased to be here.
Oh, great. So how has Piping Live been going this week so far then, and what's coming up this weekend?
Yeah, it's been going really well, thanks very much. I guess the festival's taken on a bit of a different feel from normal years, as I guess you would expect. Last year we were able to kind of put together a very small programme of online events. We did four online concerts last year, quite last minute put together, but this year obviously we've been planning with a lot more notice as to the circumstances, I suppose. So we created a programme that's more or less entirely blended. All of the in-person stuff that's been happening here at the centre is also taking place online, and there are a number of things that are taking place online only for various different reasons as well. But yeah, it's been going really well. Thanks very much. It's really nice to have people back in the Piping Centre. To hear music ringing through the place.
Yeah, I bet it's been quite quiet the last wee while.
It certainly has. It's been a bit of a ghost ship for over a year now. So
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that the pipes are playing once more.
Yeah, thank you.
And so, for anyone who's missed the start of the festival, then can they go back and watch what's already been going on throughout the week?
You can do, yes. So all the stuff that's online is available for a week afterwards. That's at pipinglive.co.uk, where you can browse through the whole programme. And like I said, everything's taking place online, and there's a few things that are only happening online, but yeah, you should be able to access broadcasts of the whole programme for a limited time.
Brilliant. Well, that's great. I'm glad that no one will be missing out. So. And have you yourself been featuring in any of the concerts this week then, or will you be over the weekend?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll be playing Friday night here this evening, which is pretty exciting. I'm a member of the band called Trist, and we're playing with Canaris Quintet this evening. And yeah, that's a pretty exciting show for us as a band. Trist is a group of 10 pipers, and we're all sort of composer, performers, maybe involved more on the folk scene and the kind of more progressive end of the piping tradition. And the group is performing a new programme of music tonight that was specially commissioned by a number of 5 composers. We were fortunate to secure some support from the PRS Foundation, Fun Rights Society, and yeah, it's a pretty challenging programme for us, but in the best possible way. So yeah, can't wait to get the pipes out.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh well, let's hope that everyone goes and tunes in after they've watched this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so I read that your piping career all started at the age of 9, which is very impressive. So how did you first get into piping? Were there other pipers in the family or any other musicians who inspired you?
Yeah, no, you're right. I did start at 9, and I was very fortunate that my father plays. So I very much grew up with the sound of the pipes in the house. And, was weaned from a young age, I suppose, with the sound of the pipes ringing in my ears. And yeah, I guess, I've had a number of inspirations over the years. My dad, obviously, and he taught me for a little while at the very beginning. Took me all through the basic stuff that you need to learn. And then we would kind of travel regularly to Glasgow for lessons at the College of Piping, as it was at that time, in the West End of the city, where I got lessons from a chap called Angus McClellan, and various others, but predominantly Angus, right through my teenage years. Yeah, like I say, lots of inspiration along the way, and not all necessarily pipers as well. Music more broadly, it's kind of become my career and my life, I suppose. So.
Yeah. And are there any other instruments you play in addition to the pipes then, or have you focused?
I kind of tinker around. I wouldn't say that I was any great shakes at anything else. The whistle would be the kind of second instrument, I suppose.
Oh, okay.
And voice as well. I sing a bit as well.
Oh, brilliant.
But I guess perhaps more than that, I produce electronic music, so which I kind of like blend in with the traditional music that I make. Because that's kind of that's kind of my kind of creative avenue, I suppose.
Brilliant. And so you said obviously you had been attending the college in the West End for some lessons, but then as you progressed, were you a member of any pipe bands, or how did you keep going with that career?
Yeah, so as a teenager, I played for a little while with the Ayr Pipe Band Society. I'm originally from Troon, so.
Oh, it's the Troon Tartan behind me, actually.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So yeah, I grew up in Troon, so I guess at that time anyway. This would have been in the 90s. The kind of best option for a band relatively nearby would have been the Ayr Pipe Band Society. And I did that for a few years, but to be honest with you, I was more focused on solo performance in pipe bands, and that certainly took precedence as I was growing up, and then I guess probably has done throughout my career. I've been a member of the Spirit of Scotland pipe band, which was a group put together by the National Piping Centre's former director of piping, Roddy McLeod. So I played with that band on a few occasions, but in comparison to perhaps some of my peers, where pipe bands have very much been the road that they've travelled, I certainly couldn't claim to kind of made a career out of bands. Yeah.
And did the neighbours ever get annoyed hearing all those practices?
Remarkably not, it has to be said. With myself and obviously my father, I was saying, my brother plays now, but and he did a little bit when we were young, but he didn't play right through his teens. But and my dad taught other kids from nearby, kids and adults as well. So there was always pipes in the house, really. But yeah, incredibly, in a kind of semi-detached house in Troon, the neighbours didn't complain at all.
Oh, they must have been enjoying it then.
Yeah, must have been indeed. That being said, I've lived in Glasgow since I was 18, and I've never really been into practicing in any of the flats that I've lived in across the city.
Yeah.
I suppose I've always been lucky to work places where it's fine to play.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, you've still got somewhere you can play, so that's good. And so then, how did you first become involved with the National Piping Centre, and can you tell us a bit about its history?
Yeah, sure. So I started working here in 2007, and it kind of came about through, at that time, 2006, 2007, I spent a year or so in Australia, and whilst I was playing a lot whilst I was out there, was a member of the Queensland Police Pipe Band, and the Piping Centre's former director, Roddy McLeod, that I just mentioned, was actually visiting Australia himself at that time, doing a tour of some teaching and performing. We got to chatting one day, and he said, when I got back to Scotland, to give him a call. And they happened at that time to be looking for someone to work in the shop here at the Piping Centre. The cards all kind of landed in the right place at the right time, really. So like I say, I've been here since 2007 and working in the shop for a little while, and then just really teaching the whole time. And it was last year that I was made head of piping studies when Roddy stepped down from his role, and former head of piping studies, Finlay MacDonald, took over the directorship. But the Piping Centre sort of generally, that's a kind of potted history of my time here, but the Piping Centre itself opened in 1996. And I guess the concept at the time was to create a home fit for piping for the 21st century. The College of Piping in the West End at the time was not perhaps, the facilities were deteriorating basically, and we weren't being matched with the financial support that was perhaps necessary to really ensure that the facilities were, up to scratch for the 21st century. So that was kind of very much at the sort of central conception of the National Piping Centre project. And since then, I guess we've gone from strength to strength with what the obvious blip of the last 16, 17 months or so.
Okay, and so I believe the centre also includes the Museum of Piping and the Piper's Trust restaurant, which I read even has its own 8-bedroom hotel. So there's actually a lot more to the centre than I had ever appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. In the basement here we've got what we call the piping school. That's all our practice facilities. We've got 10 soundproofed practice booths down there with some teaching rooms. But here on the ground floor, I'm sitting in our library right now, and through the wall from me there is our museum. And as you point out, there's the Piper's Choice as well, which is an award-winning restaurant and hotel, as you also point out. It's a small, I think it's officially classed as a restaurant with rooms. And yes, it's an award-winning wedding venue as well. We've got a big auditorium upstairs where Piping Live is largely taking place actually this year. So there's a lot going on in this place.
Yeah, I imagine usually it would be quite a busy place then.
Yeah, exactly. Although I guess that's been the big shock to the system with the last 17 months and just having a lack of people buzzing around the place.
Yeah. Oh well, hopefully it'll soon be filling up again.
Yeah, well, things are looking good, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, and so if anyone wants to come and visit the centre, do they have to book an appointment or can they just pop in?
No, you can just pop in. As you've already said, there's a museum which is open to the public to come around and sort of browse through artefacts. And Piper's Choice as well is open for business, so please do come by.
Yeah, well, now that travel is starting to reopen, then hopefully we'll have lots of people coming to join you.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the centre exists to promote the study and history of the Highland Bagpipe. So how is that achieved? And obviously, as head of piping studies, can you tell us a bit more about the courses that are on offer?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess it's important to remember that the Highland Bagpipe is an ancient musical tradition here in Scotland, and it's quite often kind of associated with the sort of pageantry around about it, but it's a serious art form with centuries worth of repertoire and the kind of associated culture. So in my position as head of piping studies, my primary responsibility is for the degree in piping that we run in partnership with the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. So there's the traditional music department at the Royal Conservatoire, and the traditional music course, and then there's a piping course that runs parallel to that. A good bit of overlap between the two branches. And yeah, so like I said, my role is primarily sort of managing the degree course and teaching on it as well, of course. It's a really great thing to be able to sort of work with some very, very talented young players and helping them to find their path within their tradition, you know.
Well, and I read that it's the only degree course in the UK, so it's something quite special, really.
Yeah, for piping specifically, there are other traditional music courses, but yeah, specifically for piping in the UK, it is indeed. So yeah, I mean, and that's obviously, like I said, what kind of occupies most of my time. But in addition to that, we run an HNC and HND course, which is fully aligned with the SQA, obviously. We also just run privately one-to-one lessons as well. That was kind of what I did for years here. Just teaching all comers, evening classes, and of course as well there's the National Youth Pipe Band of Scotland, which is kind of one of our flagship projects.
Brilliant. Oh, so lots of different ways and levels for people to kind of get involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. And so I appreciate, the aims and objectives of the centre might have changed over the last 18 months or so, but looking ahead to more normal times, how do you and the centre see that kind of developing over the next few years?
Well, I mean, I think that the primary aim to promote and educate on our instrument and our repertoire, I think that will remain to be central to all of our operations. I don't want to speak too broadly to the piping centre here, of course, but yeah, just prior to the onset of the pandemic last March, the piping centre took on, like I was saying earlier on, a new director of piping in Finlay MacDonald, who's sort of been honing a sort of new strategic vision for the organisation, which will hopefully see us build on all our existing projects and work towards becoming perhaps more fully integrated into the wider world of traditional music in Scotland.
Okay, well, that sounds great. And do you have any particular ambitions personally then?
Yeah, it's good to have these things. I hope to release a book of music next year. I recently, a couple of years ago then, I did a master's in Scottish music at the Conservatoire, and the sort of work that I did with that will basically be brought into this book, which is a kind of musical history of piping in Glasgow. It's a project that I went quite deep into over the last couple of years. So that's getting that kind of done and dusted is my top priority and ambition, I suppose. Other than that, it's just to keep working on new music and hopefully release some more albums.
Yeah. That sounds good. And so I imagine most people think of piping as being very traditional, which of course it is, but as you mentioned earlier, you also get to be a bit more creative through your electronic music production. So do you kind of see that as the future of piping, or do you think it will always remain a very traditional instrument, or a bit of both, really?
I think it'll probably be a bit of both. I think there's a sort of general kind of cultural shift happening in Scotland just generally. I think that it's been particularly evident in traditional music in Scotland that I think that there's been this shift, as I was saying, towards perhaps more progressive values in our music and our culture just generally, where maybe at one time things were perhaps a little more conservative. This sort of drive to develop and for the traditions to evolve has become more prominent. So yeah, I think that will very much continue, but at the same time, the more traditional elements of it, shall we say, perhaps the stuff that's more competition orientated, perhaps.
Yeah.
A huge part of the piping tradition. Competition is a very, very dominant part of the tradition. I don't see any sign of that declining. There's more people playing the bagpipes today and competing as pipers than at any time in the instrument's history. So, if we kind of exclude the last 16, 17 months or something like that. But yeah, I think that, you know, as time goes on, we just see more branches kind of going off from the kind of core tradition.
Yeah, and so for like me, the uninitiated, then are there lots of different playing styles and techniques then, or actually is it just everyone's kind of own take on that?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, and I would say that over the last sort of 50, 60 years, playing styles have kind of homogenized a lot more. And there's perhaps less individuality, perhaps, or maybe even more relevant would be at one time regional styles would have been perhaps more evident, depending on where you lived and where you grew up and who taught you. So, you know, if for instance you grew up on South Uist, your playing styles would likely be quite different from someone growing up, say, in Fife. You know, these regional variations would have been like quite pronounced.
Yeah.
And I guess as time's gone on, and you know, perhaps these more remote communities in the country become increasingly sort of depopulated. You know, these places where once South Uist was quite densely populated at one time, and really sparsely populated. And, you know, a lot of these people have migrated down into the central belt of Scotland. So I think there's an inevitable homogenisation that's taking place there. But I think that, again, in line with the previous question about developments into the future, I think that there is a kind of growing interest in sort of individual expression with the instrument, which is not easy, it has to be said. The pipes is, in some ways, it's a very, very limited instrument. You only have 9 notes. You've got one dynamic, so you can't play loudly or softly. Well, you can play loudly, but you can't play softly. You can't leave spaces. You're either completely in or completely out. And you've only got one fixed sort of texture to the sound that you make as well. You can't control any of that. So these limitations that we have on our instrument are actually the tools of the trade for most musicians in order to find their own expressive voice. So despite those limitations, I think that there's a growing interest again now, discovering ways in which we can be more individualistic in the way that.
Yeah. Well, and I assume that then really shows the true skills of a player if they're able to develop a personal style when, like you say, it's actually not very easy to do that.
Indeed it does, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The very best players are indeed highly skilled in that you can sort of tell who they are. Just hearing a sort of flurry of notes.
Yeah. And so what would you say to anyone who's thinking about taking up the pipes to encourage them then?
Well, first of all, I would encourage you to get yourself a practice chanter and a book that's going to sort of guide you, but most importantly would be to seek a good teacher, which obviously you can provide here at the Piping Centre. And yeah, it's not an instrument that can very successfully be taught to yourself.
Yeah.
I've been teaching for over 20 years now, and the number of players that I've seen that have taught themselves successfully, you can count on one hand, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would be number one, most important thing. I'd like to get a teacher.
Sounds good and very sensible. And so throughout your career then you talked about being in Australia, but other than that, has it allowed you to travel, and if so, where was the most exotic or your favourite place that you've ever got to play?
Well, yeah, so yeah, I mean, I've travelled a fair bit, playing, teaching, and neither as well, it has to be said. But the most exotic, I was in Oman a few years ago.
Oh wow!
In the Middle East, doing some teaching there. We at the Piping Centre here, we used to run some courses in Oman and here for Omani military personnel. So
yeah, I think at North Berwick Highland Games, I think I actually met the band when they came over. So
you will have done, yeah, absolutely. They were over. It was a few years ago, but yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that was the memory of playing my pipes on top of a camel, I guess, would probably strike me as one of the most outlandish images from my career in piping. So.
Well, that was more exotic than I thought you were going to say. So. Brilliant. And so is there anywhere still on your bucket list to be able to go and play then?
Oh, I love travelling, and I've done a good bit of travelling, as I said, as a musician and otherwise. So, to be honest, at this particular stage, just the thought of going anywhere remotely exotic is very appealing. So there's nowhere in particular, I don't think. We'll see what the next few years bring.
Oh, definitely. It's good to keep your options open. And so, of course, being a lover of tartan, and that's what we do, then I have to ask which tartans you wear personally, any clans you're connected to, and which are your favourites?
Sure, well, as you probably guessed with the name Mulhearn, there's no direct association with any particular tartan. Mulhearn's a west of Ireland name, which is where my father's ancestors come from, we reckon. And my mum's actually from the south of England, so nothing directly there. But on my father's side, I guess the closest clan association would be MacAlpine. So when I do don the kilt, it's an ancient MacAlpine tartan that I wear, which is really nice and understated, I think.
Yeah, it is. Like you say, it's not one of the brighter ones. So.
No.
Yeah. And any that you've worn through the bands and competitions that you've been at then?
Now, the Spirit of Scotland band that I was mentioning a little while ago, I think we wore the Isle of Skye tartan. That's quite a modern tartan.
Yeah, it's very nice. Yeah.
Which again is kind of subtle. It's like kind of nice muted colours. And for a long time, actually, I used to wear a hunting Ross tartan. Which, yeah, I really liked that one. It's quite unusual. Three strong red stripes through it, which
I always think it's very festive.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, no, it's cool. I think it was a really nice sort of dress tartan, I think, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, aye.
Oh, well, good choices. I approve of them all. And so, obviously being so passionate about piping, are there other aspects of Scottish culture and tradition that you love sharing too?
Of course, I mean, right across our traditional music, I suppose, not exclusively bagpipes. I would say I'm a passionate supporter of all of our traditional music, our song culture, song traditions, and I guess quite importantly as well, is Scottish literature. Is a big part of my bookshelf. So yeah, that would, I'd put that stuff sort of centre of my interests.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I think a lot of people will share those interests. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, John, and like I say, taking time out of what is already a busy week. And it was great to hear more about, the centre and how you first got involved. So I hope the end of the festival goes well this weekend, and I look forward to coming and visiting you in the centre in the future.
Thanks very much, Emily. It's a pleasure to talk to you with me gassing away and the festival's kicking off. So yeah, thanks very much.
No problem at all. Well, let's hope everyone goes and tunes into you this evening.